Welcome to RGATV. I'm here today with Euan McCreadie, who is a communication design graduate at Grace School of Art, who currently has his work on show at the 2020 Digital Degree Show. Euan, do you want to tell us a little bit more about yourself?
Well, I finished my course at Grays this year, so my work is part of the virtual degree show, and I started off at Grays. I started at Grays in 2018. I did my HND at Nestcall. I did a photography HND there, and then in 2018 I did the RGU link. So I started off doing the third year, and then I decided during the first semester of my third year that I was going to do the fourth year. So, and didn't at all expect last year when I started that we were going to be having a virtual degree show. So I don't think any of us seen this coming.
It's definitely a shame that it's been shifted to virtual. I was looking forward to the degree show as well.
I think there's like an upside to it as well, because I think when it was the physical end of your show, it was very like it was only really people that kind of like maybe lived in Scotland or maybe like traveling distance of Aberdeen that could kind of see it. Whereas with the virtual one, you could visit it from like anywhere in the world. So I think as upset as folk were, I was a wee bit annoyed as well that we couldn't have a proper one. I'm glad that we've kind of been given this opportunity for it to kind of go global, I suppose.
You focused on architecture, specifically brutalism, and it's really impressive. I absolutely love your images. Before we go into looking at the images, I guess a good question for the people at home that are interested in photography would be, what would be your camera of choice and your lens of choice for shooting your images?
Well, for the past few years, I've been using a Nikon D3300, and I use my typical lens is an 18 to 55mm lens. I've got one that goes up to like 300 mils, but recently I've just been using this like wider angle one because it's better. I feel like it's better for architecture. So I mean, I've always used, from the time that I've had an SLR, I've always used a Nikon, and I've had experience shooting a bit of film as well. I've shot a wee bit of black and white film, and I've got a Polaroid as well, but I've not used it for a while. So, and I shot in color and black and white with that, but mainly I just shoot with the digital because I find it easier, and you can make it look however you want in Photoshop. You can add like film filters, and you know what I mean, you can do all kinds of stuff with it. So mainly digital.
Is there any specific presets that you like to use when editing?
Mainly I'll pull up a photo. Well, when I was editing the pictures for the architecture pictures, I was pulling them up in raw filter in Photoshop, making slight adjustments in that, and then opening it in Photoshop, and then I use this thing called Nick Collection. Don't know if you've ever heard of it. It's like it's like a plugin made by Google, and I used I think I use them in every single photo that I edited, and even for the other projects, because they've got really good like filters and all that kind of stuff. So I just kind of, for some of the photos, I think I used maybe 2 or 3 filters and just kind of blended them together. Mainly Bridge and Photoshop. It's mainly the process when it comes to editing pictures.
So you mentioned earlier that you were at Nescall, and then you left Nescall with your HND, and then you became a ship's photographer. That sounds super interesting.
It was quite a good experience. So what had happened was I was in the second semester of the HND, and I was a wee bit like unsure about what I was going to do next. And then there was a guy called Ian Shewan who came to the college one day. Steve, like one of the head lecturers there, mentioned that this guy was coming, and he said he works for this company that does photographic services on a ship, and I thought it seems quite interesting. So went along to that, went along to his like spiel, if you know what I mean. And the ship's photographer is a company that's based in Southampton, and they basically provide services for P&O's cruise ships. So I came away from that meeting thinking, oh, maybe I could like go for that and see if I hear back. Maybe I'll get like an interview. So as soon as I got home, went on their site, filled in an application, and then I think a few weeks later, I got an email back inviting me to an interview in Southampton, and they said just bring along a portfolio of work. Went to the place where they were doing the interviews, and it was only me and two other people that were there, and so I was quite nervous. I was doing the interview. I think a few weeks later they got back to me and they said, oh, we'd like to offer you a position on Ventura, which is one of P&O's ships. Then what I had to do was I had to go to London and like sort all the paperwork out. I had to get a visa, and then that September, so this was 2016. So it was on the 18th. I started my first day on Ventura, and I was quite nervous, but I'm glad I did it, because I think I was quite naive when it came to that kind of industry. So I'd never been on a cruise or nothing like that. I'd only been on like ferries, you know. So I'm glad I did it. I think in doing it, it helped me to get into Grays. I think I would have done things differently now, but I think at the end of the day, I'm glad I actually did it, because I actually managed to get tips from folk. One of the tips that I still kind of try and remember now is to always keep shoots in there, always keep entire shoots, if you know what I mean. Never get rid of any misfires. Always keep your bad pictures, because then you can look at them and you can see where you went wrong and all that kind of stuff. So, but my first day I was like a nervous wreck, because they were looking for, because it was portraiture.
Mm-hmm.
So they were looking for headshots within the brackets of the viewfinder.
Yeah.
And I was struggling at first to get like the parameters right. But after a few days, I managed to get a wee bit better. But it was, yeah. I mean, there was positives and negatives about doing it. But at the end of the day, I'm glad I did it.
Is that something you'll be looking to do more of in the future as well?
To do portraiture.
Yeah.
I think so. Yeah. I mean, I have got quite a soft spot for portraiture. I mean, I had to do it obviously as a job on Ventura, and I kind of wish that I was able to keep some of the pictures, but they were very strict, because it was like the hands on the shoulder. When it came to like couples and stuff, it was like the very kind of like formal poses and all that kind of thing, and all these different backdrops. And I remember getting photos with the captain, and I kind of wish that I'd asked for copies of those pictures, but they were very strict when it came to getting release forms and stuff like that. So I do quite like portraiture. I don't know if I would make it my main like business model, I suppose. I prefer doing more travel-y / architecture-y kind of stuff.
Why did you choose architecture, and specifically Brutalism?
I was in the library quite a lot, looking at different books, different types of stuff. And I was actually I then moved on to maybe doing a project on different types of Scottish architecture, like classical kind of stuff, like a mixture of like castles and like new stuff. And then I remembered, I don't know if you've ever been to Cumbernauld.
No, never been.
No, well, it's called a New Town, and they've got a shopping centre that was built in this brutalist style. And at some point I thought of that, and I thought maybe I could do a project on that. So I looked more into it, and then learned that the idea behind it was that that kind of architecture is supposed to look ugly, because they wanted it stemmed from a movement called, I think it's constructivism, something that it started maybe like 100 years ago, and the idea was that they wanted more of an emphasis on like the purpose of the building and like the practicality of it over looks, I just did more and more research, and there was some really good examples coming up in London. So I bought this map. It like pinpointed all the different examples of it in London. Like you'd have to make like several visits to like get around all of them. So I thought I'll just pick a few, and it was a few weeks before lockdown. So I felt a bit of pressure to try and get some decent stuff in London, and in about 6 hours, I think I got maybe like 1,000 pictures.
Your room, it looks to me that you've gone for more of a traditional gallery feel to it. Did you want to tell me more about the room, why your choices were the way that they were?
I thought I'd go for a concrete floor because I thought it kind of alludes to obviously the building materials in the photos, because obviously that's one of the main building components when it comes to brutalism. This like exposed concrete, all these kind of little fine details, pebble dash, steel, glass, all that kind of stuff, like all the boxy kind of structures and stuff. And I just picked white because I think it's just one of the best colors for hanging pictures up. Thought I'd keep it simple. I just kind of wanted the images to speak for themselves.
The first image is it's the QEH in London, and the left corner there's a image of someone dressed like the Joker.
I was debating whether or not to put that in as one of the final images. That was one of the last pictures that I took in London that day, and I was taking pictures of the Queen Elizabeth Theatre, I think it's called. It was a bit impulsive to include that. I was just shooting away, and I just thought it was, I don't know, I just thought it looked very kind of unusual, and there were loads of folk that day doing their own kind of shoots and stuff.
The next image, again, it's framed really well. It's really, really nice. It is the IBM, South Bank, London.
Yeah.
Do you want to tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah. Well, that was unplanned, that building, because it didn't show up. It didn't show up on the map that I'd got, and so it was at the it was literally around the corner from the South Bank Centre, that was the last place that I visited. It's this complex that's got loads of different examples of it. So you've got the Hayward, you've got the National Theatre, all the buildings in that complex were built under like the Brutalist style. I just wandered over to it, and I just started taking pictures, and then I noticed this staircase, and there was no one else about, and then I just started taking pictures. I was doing like landscape portrait, and as I was taking it, I thought I think I could probably use that as a final.
It's incredibly symmetrical, but yet somehow
I loved the symmetry in it.
Even the trees are almost symmetrical.
Yeah, that was so bizarre that even the trees were symmetrical as well. I had no idea. I didn't really pick up on that until after I shot it.
For a little while, the trees are so almost symmetrical that my first thought was the image has been split and then mirrored. But then I realized there is subtle differences within the trees, and I was like, hold on, no, that's actual photos.
No, I actually did that. With one of my finals. I think it was the Lauderdale Tower. Mm-hmm. I took a photo of the side of it, and I thought maybe I could try and like crop it and maybe do some kind of like abstract photo with it. So I definitely did do that with one of my pictures, but I never did it with that. That was just how it appeared.
Next, we have your main wall when you first walk in, which is the Barbican.
I loved the there's loads of like details. There's loads of like fine details in that architecture that you don't really you have to like go up close, I think, to actually appreciate it. But yeah, again, I made use of the analog filters that you get in Nick Collection. I thought these filters are perfect for this kind of architecture, because they just bring out so much detail and they sharpen it, and you know, it just brings up all these little artifacts that you wouldn't really see in maybe if it wasn't as like sharp, I suppose.
Okay, next we have, I believe it is the National Theatre. This is really quite stunning, eh? I really like it.
Again, just wandering about, trying to scrape for finals and saw that, and I loved the pattern underneath it and the ceiling underneath, and I really loved that picture. I actually thought that was a potential final as well when I shot it. I was proud. I was definitely proud with how South Batman's came out.
We have one left, which is the Lauderdale Tower.
That was one of the earliest ones. I think I shot that earlier in the day. I ended up visiting 3 different locations, like at 3 different Brutalist locations that day. The first one was the Barbican Estate. That was the first place. I visited, and I think by the end of that, I think I got maybe 600 odd pictures because it was a massive estate. Like I didn't think there were so many towers. Again, just I get quite spontaneous, but also like planned, but also spontaneous. Just played around with different perspectives, and then I always try and find something to focus on in the architecture, and then try and get it from different angles and different perspectives, maybe up close and stuff like that.
Now that you've graduated, what are your plans for the future?
In the future, I'd definitely like to have a go at being self-employed. I'd like to try and have my own photography business at some point. But I mean, there's still so much I'd love to do. I'd like to get more experience in like marketing and advertising and stuff like that. Stuff that I could maybe carry over when it comes to starting my own business. Yeah, I think I'd like to. I think at first, like I'd be too nervous. I think at first to start a business because again, I don't really have the wherewithal, or I don't probably not enough like connections and stuff like that. But yeah, I think I'd like to work as a photographer for like an agency, or again even something a wee bit off track, I suppose, something maybe in advertising or digital media or marketing, something like that. Visit the Gray's virtual degree show. It runs until Friday the 19th. Go to graysdegree.show, and my Instagram is at just hurry up and wait, no spaces, and my website is emphotographics.com, no spaces.